As your party traverses their way through the Arctic tundra, you notice an abundance of stone formations protruding from the ground. Still, you press forward until one of these formations begins shifting unnaturally. Stone plates grind against each other, creating limbs, and only after a matter of seconds, a hulking snow-covered stone elemental now stands before you, ready to strike. You reckon you could outrun this creature, but if only it were that easy. Hello, I'm Tom the DM, and today we are going to be taking a deep dive into a custom legendary creature created by yours truly, the hulking Rimeplate Primordial. This is a perfect boss-style creature for a medium to high-level D&D party. And in this video, we're going to be going over its abilities, combat strategies, and creating a few narrative elements you can use to weave this creature into your D&D campaign. There's a whole lot to this guy, so let's get into it. Walking the barren tundra longer than any record can indicate, the Rimeplate Primordial serves as a guardian of the Arctic. It meanders without any destination in mind, seeking only to protect the creatures and landscapes native to its biome. It acts primarily on instincts, possessing no emotions or moral compass. It is, by all means, a walking incarnation of the harshest weather the Arctic tundra can provide, and anyone who gets too close seldom escapes a frozen fate. At first glance, the Rimeplate Primordial stat block looks pretty dense, but it's actually very easy to keep track of all of its abilities. Looking at its basic stats, the Rimeplate Primordial has a beefy 170 hit points, a 20 armor class, and a slew of damage resistances and immunities that correlate with its environment. But it does have vulnerability to force damage. This will prompt your party to really do some experimenting up front to try and figure out what attacks or spells might be most effective. Let's move on to its passive abilities and attributes. These are abilities that don't require any actions to enact, they are simply just part of the creature. The Primordial has a pretty cool ability called Sentience Relocation. Instead of moving on its turn, it can choose to transfer its sentience to another rock structure and take form from it, essentially teleporting. This ability is great because it allows the Primordial a lot more mobility than the party might first assume. And because of its size, it is technically a siege monster, causing it to do double damage to structures and objects. Now, its Outer Plates attribute is a fun one. When the Primordial drops below 80 hit points, its armor class lowers from 20 to 15, but it enables a special reaction ability called Plate Blast. We'll touch on that Plate Blast ability in a little bit. And lastly, the Rimeplate Primordial is a legendary creature, and as such, has 3 legendary resistances. This means 3 times per long rest, if it fails a saving throw, it can use a legendary resistance to succeed instead. Moving on to actions. The Primordial has 3 main abilities it can choose from when taking an action on its turn. It can attack twice with its Slam attack, or it can choose to throw a creature instead, sacrificing some damage output but being able to move an enemy against their will. The cool part about this ability is that its effectiveness varies based on the size of the creature that the Primordial is throwing. The smaller the creature, the further it can throw them. Now, its main ability and the reason behind its name is its Rime Beam. Using its action, the Primordial releases a 60-foot long and 30-foot wide cone of freezing cold energy. It deals 8d10 cold damage to whoever fails a Constitution saving throw, and half as much to those who succeed. Additionally, those who failed have a halved speed until they regain warmth. While this beam is extremely deadly, it does only recharge on a 6 on the roll of a d6 every turn. While these are the main 3 abilities that the Primordial has access to during its turn, it's a legendary creature, meaning it has legendary actions as well. Legendary actions are a mechanic that some boss-style monsters have in order to even out the action economy during battle. It gives the creature a pool of actions it can use between other characters' turns, so let's break them down. The Primordial can spend 1 legendary action to either use its Sentience Relocation, Slam Attack, or Throw ability. These are all abilities we've already covered and have no change in their function. But the Primordial has a special Earthquake ability that it can spend 2 legendary actions to use. While it does a trivial amount of damage, it has the potential to knock nearby enemies prone if they fail a dexterity saving throw. I'll explain why this can be extremely lethal when we talk about combat strategies. And lastly, we have one more ability that the Primordial can use as a reaction when it dips below 80 hit points. Plate Blast. Once per long rest, when the Primordial takes damage, it can blast its outer plates off of its body towards enemies. Every creature within 40 feet of the Primordial makes a dexterity saving throw, taking 8d8 bludgeoning damage on a failure, or half as much on a success. This kind of ability reminds me of classic video game bosses, where as you continue to weaken them, they unlock new powers and increase their damage output. So that was the Rimeplate Primordial stat block. As you can see, there's a lot there, but none of it is extremely complicated and it's pretty easy to manage. Now let's talk about battle strategies. Because nothing is worse than when you as the DM have planned this extremely nail-biting encounter only for the party to come in and absolutely steamroll it. The Rimeplate Primordial physically is essentially just a big lumbering rock elemental. It hits hard, but it's not very dexterous. And in my experience as a DM, mobility has been one of the most important aspects of single enemy encounters. If the party can find a way to just corner an enemy and beat it into a pulp, they will. The creature needs to have ways to move around and be able to position itself strategically. And with that being said, do not sleep on the Primordial's Sentience Relocation ability. This ability essentially works as a teleport, and if you create a battle map, in person or digitally, with stone structures scattered around it, it basically gives it free reign to be anywhere. This can be useful for evading the barbarian that got into melee with it, trying to catch the ranger that's keeping their distance, or even for just getting the right positioning to blast the party with its Rime Beam. Mobility is key. However, let's say you already have great positioning, but the paladin is getting ready to Divine Smite you and you need to get them as far away as possible. This is where its Throw Creature ability really comes in handy. It doesn't do a massive amount of damage, but it helps you control the battlefield. And using any sort of elevation in your battle map really improves this ability. Throwing a player character 30 feet horizontally might not seem like a big deal, but if they're also falling 2 stories, that can really change up the encounter. Now, I touched on this one very briefly when I was talking about legendary actions, its Earthquake ability. It might not seem like a super powerful action up front, but its main purpose is to set up an absolute beatdown when the Primordial takes its turn. If you use this legendary action right before the Primordial takes its turn, then there's a good chance that you'll be able to use its Slam ability on prone player characters, giving it advantage on those attacks. Using ability combos like this really takes things to the next level and will probably get your party thinking harder about what they are going to do as well. Alright, we've talked about how to fight as the Primordial, but now let's talk about some ways that you can narratively weave this creature into your campaign. The way that I used the Rimeplate Primordial in my campaign was as a source of energy that needed to be retrieved. Without getting too into the weeds plot-wise, my party was essentially trying to power this extremely magical machine, and they needed an organic power source that was strong enough. And they decided that the heart of this ancient elemental creature might just be the energy source that would work. So in this scenario, the Rimeplate Primordial served as a MacGuffin to the party's objective. This is a really simple example that doesn't require a whole lot of prep to integrate. The party needed something and the Primordial had it, or was it, I guess. But there are other ways that we can weave this creature into the plot of your campaign. Hell, we could make it the focus of your campaign if you really wanted to. One of the cool things about the Rimeplate Primordial is that it doesn't have a moral compass. It's just this force of nature whose sole purpose is to protect its natural landscape by eliminating anything that's not native to it. It could be the focus of a campaign where a tribe of humanoids have settled in the Arctic, but every time they have a run-in with the Rimeplate Primordial, it keeps killing them. The morality of that could actually be really interesting. So every month on my Patreon, I release an entire PDF guide on a plot hook or an encounter. If enough people are interested in me releasing a write-up for that, let me know and I'll add it to the list. Alright, so far we've discussed using the Primordial as a MacGuffin or making it the centerpiece of a plot hook or a campaign. What if the Rimeplate Primordial, a creature that is so naturally integrated into its landscape, ended up somewhere completely different, whether by magical means or otherwise? Would it start killing everything it could, confused by why nothing is matching its natural coding? Would it start altering the natural landscape to match its home biome, freezing rivers, altering the ecosystem? There's a lot of cool things that could come from just taking the Primordial and displacing it. Now, of course, the options are endless into how you can integrate this creature into your campaign. At the end of the day, just do whatever works best for you. To kind of bring everything full circle, I created this creature to serve as a fun, dynamic, and challenging encounter for a D&D party. If you want to use the Rimeplate Primordial in your D&D campaign, for whatever reason, there are 2 ways that you can get its stat block. First, I've published the Rimeplate Primordial in D&D Beyond, so you can get it there in the Homebrew section if you just search for it. But if you want a printable or downloadable version of its stat block, you can get it for free on my Patreon. There's a link in the description. And if you do end up running the Rimeplate Primordial, I would love to know how it went. Otherwise, I hope this helped, and I'll see you next time.